He works on highly scalable, cost-effective IT solutions in the cloud. Steffen, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I only have 30 minutes, and when I was invited here, I was thinking, okay, how could I help you guys from a technology perspective? As I was introduced, I'm a tech guy. So maybe some of the stuff you want to hear today is something that you give to your tech guys and get you the idea. And then I put together a few slides, and it was 50 in the end. And then I heard I have only 25 minutes, so let's start. And by the way, I'm German, so I'm not supposed to be funny, right? Okay, so what do? If you're in classified or any internet-based business, you have kind of a different story on how your site goes. Depending, you may be new, maybe growing, you may have predictable peaks whenever a paper version of what you do may come out. You have variable peaks when stuff you do gets mentioned. And maybe you need to do this worldwide because many of you are local, somewhere in the world, but maybe it's a good idea to expand to markets. And what we want to avoid is this. Because what oftentimes happens if your site gets mentioned somewhere in a mainstream media, so at Spiegel Online in Germany here, or at TechCrunch in the US or something, what happens is that your traditional infrastructure gets overloaded. So we want to get rid of this. And how do you plan for something that's unplannable? How do you plan for the peaks that you might have? Traditionally, I am around at the internet quite a long time. So what we did in the 2000, 2001 was this. And I think most of you can't afford anymore to buy machines. But think of it, if you're renting from a hoster with a fixed contract, so 1-year contract, 2-3-year contract or something, it's essentially what you do. The only difference is that you put this into a hoster instead of anything you own yourself. So what can we do? The idea of what Amazon Web Services does, and we're called Web Services because we were around before the word cloud took off. Otherwise, I think if we would found the company today, we would call it Amazon Cloud Services, but we were before this, is utility. Utility, electricity, for instance, around the 19th century, everybody had this new trend of electricity, and everybody was running their machines sooner or later on this, and everybody was generating their own. Because they got cold, they had this new machinery that wants to have electricity, and today, I don't think that anybody generates their own electricity anymore, except for maybe some really, really huge companies where the public utility network is not sufficient. Why is that the case? Because you can get it everywhere. You only pay as you go. If you don't need your electricity, if you unplug the power, you don't pay for it anymore. It's uniform, it's the same worldwide, with a little bit different plugs, but essentially it's the same. And what we do for IT infrastructure is essentially the same model. And the important thing here is it's available on demand in any size that you want. It's pay as you go. It's available everywhere worldwide. The difference is it's based on an API call. So you don't need any more people that install operating systems, build machines, wire them, and all of that. Everything's just an API call, so everything is just programmable. The only difference is we have lots of services, and I will talk about a few of these today, but we have many more, so everything that's basic IT infrastructure is available for you in this way. We have it available worldwide, so regions. Many of you are worldwide. I was talking through that, but for some people, especially if you work with customer data, with personal data, it may be important because of regulations. There are many regulations that we deal with facts on how to deal with personal data, especially in the EU. You, by law, have difficult putting data outside of the EU about your people. And many do it anyway and get away with it. But if some regulator goes to you and you put your data from the EU to, let's say, Singapore, you have bad luck because you're not supposed to do that. So that's why we have a region in Ireland. We have a region, multiple regions in the US. We have even in developing and very interesting economies like South America or East Asia. We have regions there, and we have the same infrastructure available for you worldwide, and it's in multiple availability zones. So think of it if one thing that happens, everything that can break down does break down eventually. That's just a matter of fact. So if you really want to be up and running all the time, you need to be in multiple physical locations. And doing this on your own is kind of hard, right? So that's why we have what we call availability zones, and think of it like a traditional data center. So separate power, separate networking connectivity, separate seismic zones for the US, separate flooding areas, and all of that stuff. So you really can stay in Ireland, in the EU, and still have multiple data centers available to you. And then you need to be as close to your customers as you want to be. And that's why we have something called edge locations, where we provide DNS name resolution. So if somebody's typing in your network name, he wants to resolve it to an IP address as fast as possible, and static content. So all the pictures, all the videos you have on your site need to be delivered as fast as possible to your customers, and we do this through these edge locations. Okay, and now how can Amazon Web Services help you in classified media? And the 4 things I was thinking of when I looked through the material was, okay, if one thing is elasticity. So use your resources when you need it and turn them off again if you don't need them anymore. And don't pay for them, of course. That's the idea. Second thing is storing and delivering static media. So images, videos, all that stuff. Use big data. We heard a little bit about big data before. And the 4th thing I found very interesting is human workforce. And many people don't realize that human workforce, people working for you, are available as an API call from a programmable API. And that's what I want to talk about. Okay, if you have a fixed capacity, whether it's by renting machines at a hosting provider or having machines yourself, you need to over-provision a lot of capacity all the time because you want to go to your peaks. And that's fine, depending on your workload. Think of it, you have different kinds of workloads, on and off, typical development workload, right? So if a developer comes to work at 7 a.m. or 11 a.m., then he needs his resources to create great websites for you, to do all this big data analytics and all that stuff. And he's working through the day, needs to test some stuff, needs to provision stuff, and then he goes home eventually, maybe at 10 p.m. or something. And then he doesn't need all the resources anymore, so why pay for them? Turn them off and you're fine. Predictable peaks, if you know exactly every Friday I have a peak in my usage, provision more capacity for these Fridays. And then it goes back over the weekend or any other day. All of that is still fine, but what's really bad is if the peaks go above your capacity. So you really need to be sure for that. And what we provide with cloud capacity is the ability to scale out any number of machines you want. And I will go to an example for that. So really the idea is to only pay for the capacity you use at any given time. And one word of caution before you give this to the tech guys, yes, it means that your programming, your way of doing things is also elastic by nature. So that you can distribute your load across multiple machines. Otherwise, you're kind of out of luck. You can also scale up and down, so take bigger and smaller machines during the day, but that's not as scalable as this one is. Okay, let's take an example. Animoto. So what they do is they have a site where you can upload pictures and make a video out of it, which can be very interesting in classified, because if customers upload multiple stuff and make a nice video presenting their thing they want to sell, that might be interesting. And they were one of these startups which was kind of semi-successful, so they had about 40 machines running on AWS for quite some time. And then they said, hey, I want to create a Facebook add-in, so people can not only use it from my own page, but they have it as a Facebook application, so everybody that uploads pictures to Facebook can create their own video from there. That's what I did. and they get more successful. And then they got mentioned on a famous US tech website called TechCrunch. And then things got crazy, because everybody was going to the site, trying out the service, looking if it's worth it. And they got from these 40 instances, so physical machines, to about 5,000 in 3 days. And having run on AWS, this was easily possible, and having a good architecture on their backend system, that's also important. And the other thing that's interesting, because of course, after trying this out, after being mentioned on TechCrunch, not everybody stayed with the service. Many people said, okay, that's nice, but I really don't want to produce any videos. So they get back down to about a little more than 1,000 instances after 1 or 2 days. And of course, they didn't need to pay for the other 3,000 and still were available all the time. So that's the idea of services that elasticity can give you. And we have many customers that do this. When I was watching this video from the previous presentation, I said, hey, that's a customer of me, Reddit is a customer, and Pinterest is a customer, and so on and so forth. So we have, these are only some of the case studies and not even all of them. So if you show me your smartphone or your iPad, I can show you at least 5 applications which are backed by AWS on your device. So we have many, especially in the online side, but not only. We also have traditional IT companies like Shell Oil or Schneider Electric, so this also works. And many in the media business. Spiegel TV on Germany is hosting all of their videos, so which you can watch online on AWS, because it's a good thing to do. Okay, let's talk about these storing videos and static media. Because you all know this, whatever you are selling or whatever you are presenting online, you need more and richer media. You need more of them, of course, but that's not the big factor. The real big factor is these getting bigger. So higher resolution images, more images, videos, all that stuff. So how do you store it, and how do you store it in a reliable fashion? Okay, what we provide is a storage services called S3, which you can also use with your website if you're not running the website itself on AWS. That's important. All of our services are usable separate. So you can run, say, with your traditional hoster, but upload your mass data here. We have 11 nines of durability, which means if you have 10,000 files, for 10 million years, you lose one of them. Okay, and by the way, if you want to reduce cost, we have also something called reduced redundancy, which has only 4 nines of durability and is a little bit cheaper. So that's also a possibility. And we currently have 2 trillion objects in S3. Trillion in the US sense, so billion in German, 10 to the power of 12, which means it's about 280 objects or files in S3 for every person on Earth. And what's in there is all kinds of stuff, mostly videos. I was talking about Netflix, the biggest online video service in the world. They are running all of their videos through S3 and some other capacity. So what I want to tell you with this number is just some customers are scared. So I have so many material. Can I upload it to you? Can you handle it? The answer is yes, whatever number of objects you have. It's accessible through APIs, so if you want to present stuff in an Android app, in an iOS app, or in any programming language you like, no problem. Everything's accessible through the web APIs, and we do have SDKs for your developers to make integration easy. And you can even completely serve static content. So if you can split up your website in a totally static site and the dynamic content, you can run the static website, which doesn't need server-side scripts, completely out of S3, which removes the burden of provisioning web servers, running web servers, making them high available, and all that stuff. Of course, you cannot run server-side scripts here because it's static content, but it's still worth it, and many people do this because it's really easy to do and really scalable. And then we have CloudFront, so the edge locations I mentioned earlier, more than 40 worldwide. So it's a content delivery network, that's the technical term for it. What it essentially does is Imagine somebody from here, from Cologne, goes to your website and tries to access a huge video file on your site. So the first time when this video file is accessed, it goes back to the data center in maybe Ireland and pulls down the video, which takes quite some time. But the next time, this video is cached in Frankfurt, for instance, which would be the pop in Germany or somewhere in the world. So the access for the next customer that accesses the very same video is much faster. And that's the idea of a content delivery network, and we have a really big one on this. The next thing is, if you have an issue with archiving, and in some legislation you may have an issue with archiving, in other legislation you may not have it. You may be able to delete all your ads as soon as they are no longer online. But I know it's different in many legislations. You may have a mass volume problem. And what we provide is an archiving system which has a price of 1 cent per gigabyte and month, so very cheap. This translates to about $140 per terabyte of data per year. So it's really cheap, has the same 11 nines of durability, but the price you pay for this is that you have access times of about 3 to 5 hours. So if somebody comes to you and says, I really need to see all your ads from May of 2008, you can say, okay, you can have them in 3 hours from now, and really be able to store this very cheaply and automate it. Okay, big data. We heard about big data before, so what is it? This is a business definition. It's the collection and analytics of big amounts of data to create a competitive advantage. But what does it really mean? So first of all, what's the verticals? And media and advertisement is really a big vertical to do this for targeted advertisement. I mean, I'm from Amazon, so everybody knows this Amazon recommendation site, right? And you can do similar stuff on your classified sites. So if somebody is interested in one thing, or lots of things before, what do we recommend him later? And this is done by big data number crunching, essentially, which goes through all the log files, and I will come to this, and say, okay, fine. There are so many other people which were interested in similar stuff, and then later on they watch this. That's one thing for targeted advertising. Image and video processing. We mentioned the mobile site. So if you allow your customers to upload the video to your site, you need to transcode it to different formats for mobile. You need a smaller size video for the iPhone. You need a bigger size video for the PC, and so on and so forth, so you use your bandwidth efficiently. And we can do this. And Twitter. There are more than 50 million Twitter tweets a day. So which of these are relevant for you and for your business? Big data analytics, social analytics is the way to go. But there are many online services which do this for you, so maybe you don't have to do it yourself. So what big data is about is collecting, storing, organizing, analyzing, and sharing these amounts of data. Let's take an example. So you have a website, you have a click log on your website, all these logs where customers are going, and then you need to go through it. And then you have, for example, one customer which comes to the site and really wants to see recommendations for him. So you take the click log, split it into lots of small pieces, and distribute the loads to what we call an EMR cluster. So lots of machines running this. And each of these looks up what's happening with all the different customers. And what are they actually doing? And then we aggregate the results together, and then we find out what the person actually did. And there are many programming examples for this online, but it's essentially the thing to do, because big data and Hadoop always sounds so complicated. But it's really an easy thing to do, an easy thing to grasp. We just take a big task, split it up into pieces, do separate calculations on all the separate pieces, and then pull the results together. That's it. Okay, so the final idea is what the person did. Another example, which is really important, I think, to everybody that's doing online. Which personal ability got way more important in times of the internet? The ability to spell correctly. Because if you search something and you miss the spelling, you don't find it. Well, we know that spelling is not the most good feature of many people, so all the big sites have a recommendation something. If you type something in, you get recommendations on what you actually wanted to type. So we remove the spelling errors. That's also a big data job. So if somebody previously mistyped any word and then later on did the same search with the correct spelling, you can catch that from your web server logs and then do recommendations. Yelp, online pages, does that on EMR, for instance, from Amazon Web Services. And the good thing is that you can make these calculations very fast, because one instance for 100 hours costs the same as 100 instances for 1 hour. So if your job is really highly parallelizable, you can scale down the amount of time very fast at a very low cost. And that's called $6 with Amazon. Okay, last thing, human workforce. Human workforce as a service. So what is it? The service is called Mechanical Turk. One piece of caution, that this service has one slight disadvantage, that you need a US bank account to use it. But there are many services out there that give you the ability to work around that. So what it is, it's a way to give jobs to people online, to real person online, to do work for you for a small amount of money. That's the idea. So you get flexible workforce, you get higher quality, you only pay when you're satisfied with the result, and it gets really easy. So when would you want to use it? You need it whenever a human is better at doing things than a machine. And there are many people, many examples of that. So pattern recognition, classification of stuff. So if you have these nice schemas that were mentioned in the previous presentation, how do you classify what's uploaded to your site, image-wise, to many categories? You can have humans do this for you. Okay, so typical examples are categorization, so classification, tagging, sentiment analytics. So if you have a kind of a feedback system online that you provide to your customer, you probably want to know if people love you or hate you. And if this is a lot of stuff, it can be hard to do. So sentiment analytics is another thing. Transcription, we were talking about an automatic translation of things. Yeah, that's nice if you're Microsoft or Google, but maybe you want to do manual transcription. So if you have a video, you may want to have a text of the video on the site because it's way more searchable than the video itself. Doing a transcription job is a good example for this. Moderation. Or if you're in a legislation where you need to be really careful about certain pictures or images not appearing on your site. So having appropriate or weeding out inappropriate content, that's also a good job to do. So what it is you create a job, then it gets sent out to our system. Many people around the world can accept it. You can have a bar. So if you're really specific on a certain industry which requires a kind of knowledge, you can have a pre-check if the person that wants to do the job is qualified to actually do it. That's more in science, scientific stuff and something. Of course, the price gets higher if you do this. But if you really want to do this, you can. And then you get the results back and have it available programmatically as everything. So let's take an example. Somebody uploads a picture and you want to classify it through various means, and okay. The thing is, the task somebody needs to do needs to be easily describable. I also had a customer which I found a very interesting use case, which created a startup for archiving all the social data. And they said, okay, we need a cool name for this site, so it appears on all the smartphones, all the devices with a cool name. And what they did on Mechanical Turk is that they described what their service does. So archiving social media, make it available to you so you have your full history. And said, okay, and now send me in recommendations on how I should call my service. And of course, about 50% of the results came back were the first result on Google about these keywords. So these were not that interesting. But they finally got away with about 10 names for their services. Then they sent this out again to all their early adopters and said, which is the coolest one? And then they choose their name from a Mechanical Turk job. That's what I think was an interesting kind of work. So I'm out of time. If you want to know more, these are the German language pages, but we of course have English language pages for everything. So if you want to know more about the service, just ask me now, because I will take questions now. Ask me during the lunch break or anytime later on my email address, skrause@amazon.de. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steffen.